I'm Mackenzie Wilson, 32, standing in my faded jeans and worn sweater inside Prestige National Bank. Despite the millions in my accounts, nobody would guess it from my appearance. My brother-in-law Bradley works here as a manager, the same man who spent years looking down on me while elevating my sister Sarah to his elite social circle. He spots me from across the marble floor, his handsome face instantly twisting into a sneer. I take a deep breath, knowing what's coming. If only he knew who I really was. Before I dive into what happened next, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated because of how you look. Trust me, you'll want to see how this story unfolds. Sarah and I grew up in a modest home in Michigan. Our parents owned a small hardware store that barely kept us afloat, but they prioritized love over luxury. Dad would say, "Girls, wealth isn't what's in your wallet, it's what's in your heart." Mom would nod in agreement while patching our hand-me-downs. Those simple lessons shaped me, but Sarah always yearned for more. When I was 22 and Sarah 20, our father was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Mom had already been battling lupus for years. Their medical bills began to mount, insurance covering less than half. I was halfway through my computer science degree at Michigan State, while Sarah was pursuing business at an expensive private university. "I can't drop out now," Sarah protested when I suggested we both take a break to help our parents. "This degree is my ticket out. Besides, you're the nurturing one." So I left college to run the store and care for our parents. For 3 years, I worked 16-hour days, splitting time between inventory management and hospital visits. Dad passed first, then Mom 6 months later. Sarah attended both funerals, flying in and out the same day to minimize disruption to her studies. After graduation, Sarah landed an internship at a prestigious financial firm in New York. There, she met Bradley Thompson, handsome, ambitious, and from old money. Their courtship was brief, their wedding lavish. I sold my only valuable possession, Mom's vintage pearl necklace, to afford the bridesmaid dress Sarah insisted upon. "Just try to look presentable," she'd said, eyeing my drugstore makeup and self-trimmed hair. Bradley's family is very particular. At the wedding, Bradley's mother mistook me for waitstaff. When corrected, she'd smiled tightly and said, "Oh, how quaint to have the shopkeeper's sister in the bridal party." Sarah never defended me. After their honeymoon, Sarah transformed completely. Her Midwestern accent disappeared, replaced by the same affected tone Bradley's family used. She began referring to our childhood as that unfortunate period before college. Our parents' struggles became an embarrassing anecdote at dinner parties. Meanwhile, I was drowning in inherited debt from the store and medical bills. Yet something unexpected happened during those years running the shop. I'd created inventory management software to simplify our operations. Several local businesses had noticed and asked to use it. In my spare time, I refined the system, adding features they requested. One night, working late after closing, I had a revelation. The software I'd built could solve problems for small businesses everywhere. I sold the hardware store, paid off the most pressing debts, and used the remaining $5,000 to formally launch my software company, Modest Merchant. For 5 years, I lived in a tiny studio apartment, eating ramen and working 20-hour days. I hired hungry, brilliant programmers who believed in the vision. We expanded from inventory management to complete business solutions for small enterprises. While Sarah posted Instagram photos from the Amalfi Coast and the Maldives, I was coding until sunrise. 2 months ago, a major tech corporation offered $800 million for Modest Merchant. After ensuring my employees would be taken care of with generous packages, I accepted. Overnight, I went from scraping by to having more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Yet I changed nothing about my lifestyle. I kept my modest apartment, drove my 15-year-old Honda, and wore the same rotation of jeans and sweaters. The money wasn't real to me yet, and truthfully, I didn't want it to change who I'd become. I hadn't told Sarah or Bradley about the sale. Our communication had dwindled to obligatory birthday texts and occasional holiday gatherings where Bradley would corner me with questions like, "Still doing that little computer thing? Ever think about getting a real career with benefits?" Last week, Sarah called, a rare occurrence. "We're having a dinner party Saturday for some of Bradley's colleagues. You should come." Her tone suggested this was a generous act of charity. "Are you sure?" "Last time. Just don't wear those awful sneakers." 7 o'clock. "Don't bring anything. Your store-bought wine is always embarrassing." After hanging up, I realized I needed cash for some shopping before the dinner. My new wealth existed mostly in digital form, with only a small checking account for daily expenses. Which is how I found myself at Prestige National Bank that fateful Thursday morning, about to collide with Bradley's world in a way neither of us could have anticipated. Prestige National Bank stood like a temple of wealth in downtown Manhattan, all gleaming marble and soaring columns. I'd passed it hundreds of times, but never entered. My modest banking needs were served by a simple online account and the ATM near my apartment. As I pushed through the heavy bronze doors, I felt immediately out of place. The cavernous main floor buzzed with hushed, important conversations. Men in bespoke suits and women in designer dresses glided across Italian marble, their expressions suggesting they were conducting transactions far more significant than my planned $100 withdrawal. The security guard gave me a suspicious once-over, his gaze lingering on my scuffed boots and the coffee stain on my sleeve. I'd spilled it rushing out the door and hadn't bothered changing, a decision I was now regretting. "Can I help you?" he asked, emphasis suggesting I might be lost. "I'm just here for a withdrawal," I replied, clutching my ancient leather wallet. He pointed to a row of teller windows where a modest line had formed. I nodded thanks and took my place behind a woman whose diamond earrings probably cost more than everything I owned, or at least everything I appeared to own. As I waited, I observed the bank's operations with fascination. Regular customers stood in line while others, clearly preferred clients, were escorted directly to private offices. The wealth disparity was built into the very architecture of the place, with velvet ropes and frosted glass separating the banking castes. Near a cluster of offices, I spotted Bradley. He looked exactly as he had at Christmas, expensive haircut, perfect teeth, posture that screamed old money confidence. He was chatting animatedly with an elderly couple, his sales smile firmly in place. I considered leaving before he saw me, but it was too late. His eyes flicked in my direction, registered my presence, and narrowed slightly. He whispered something to a colleague, nodding in my direction. The other banker glanced over, his expression a mixture of curiosity and amusement. My cheeks burned. I knew that look. It was the same one Bradley gave the waitstaff when they brought him the wrong vintage. I'd experienced Bradley's condescension for years, at holiday gatherings where he'd quiz me about my cute little business while checking stock prices on his phone, at Sarah's birthday where he'd loudly wondered if I could really afford the modest gift I'd brought, at their housewarming where he'd introduced me to his friends as Sarah's sister who never quite found her path. The line inched forward. Bradley finished with his clients and disappeared into an office. Maybe I'd get lucky and complete my transaction without interaction. But luck had never been my strong suit. After 15 minutes of waiting while watching VIPs breeze past, I reached the front of the line. The young teller smiled professionally, asking how she could help. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, Bradley's voice boomed from behind me. "Mackenzie, what a surprise seeing you here." I turned to find him standing uncomfortably close, cologne suffocating in its expensive intensity. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Hello, Bradley." "Linda, I'll handle this," he told the teller, who nodded and stepped back. He turned to me with exaggerated concern. "What brings you to this part of town?" "Car trouble again." The last time my Honda had broken down near their Hamptons house, Bradley had made a show of calling his mechanic, then lectured me for an hour about investing in reliability. I just need to make a withdrawal, I said quietly, aware of people watching. From which account? His voice was louder than necessary, theatrical in its customer service tone. My checking account. Just $100. His eyebrows shot up, and he let out a small scoff that drew attention from nearby customers. $100? You came all the way to a private bank for that. I kept my voice level. It was on my way. On your way to where? The thrift shop. He chuckled at his own joke, glancing around to see who was appreciating his wit. I felt my spine stiffen. Could you please just process my withdrawal? Bradley looked at me as if I'd asked him to shine my shoes. You know, ATMs exist for these smaller transactions. This bank typically handles more substantial matters. Several customers were openly watching now. A woman in a Chanel suit whispered to her companion. Bradley was putting on a show, and I was the entertainment. Bradley leaned against the counter, deliberately casual, deliberately loud. So tell me, Mac, people still call you that childish nickname, right? How's the little software thing going? Sarah mentioned you were still trying to make that work. Each word was precisely calculated to diminish. My successful company, which had just sold for nearly $1 billion, reduced to a little software thing. My chosen name, Mac, which I'd gone by since college, rendered childish. It's going fine, I replied, wanting only to complete my transaction and escape. Fine? Just fine. Bradley's voice rose further, ensuring everyone within 20 feet could hear. You know, I always tell Sarah she should offer you a position at her event planning company. Something entry-level, of course, but with room to grow. My sister's event planning company consisted of her organizing dinner parties for Bradley's colleagues' wives and calling herself an entrepreneur on Instagram. I appreciate the thought, but I'm doing well with my business. Bradley laughed, the sound sharp and theatrical. Well? You're wearing the same sweater you had on at Christmas 3 years ago. Your shoes look like they've hiked the Appalachian Trail. And you're here for $100 withdrawal, which suggests to me that, well, is a significant overstatement. Heat crawled up my neck. A small crowd had gathered, pretending to fill out deposit slips while eavesdropping. The security guard was watching with interest. Even the tellers had paused their work. My appearance doesn't reflect my company's success, I said quietly. No? Let's see, ancient Honda, apartment in, what was it, Queens, and clothes from the clearance rack. Meanwhile, Sarah is redecorating our Aspen house and just ordered her second Birkin this year. He adjusted his gold cufflinks, a gift from Sarah last Christmas, purchased with his money. Seems pretty reflective to me. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept my expression neutral. Bradley had always been cruel, but this public display was beyond anything he'd attempted before. I wondered if something had happened at work, some blow to his ego that he needed to offset by crushing mine. You know, he continued, voice dripping with false concern, Sarah worries about you. She says you never really recovered from dropping out of college. That you're stuck in some extended adolescence, playing with computers instead of building a real career. The betrayal stung. Sarah had struggled with our upbringing, yes, but I never thought she'd weaponize my sacrifices against me. I'd left school to care for our dying parents while she continued her education. That choice had altered the trajectory of my life, but not in the way they assumed. I don't need career advice, Bradley. I just need a withdrawal. $100, he repeated mockingly. What's that for? Ramen for the month. Several onlookers chuckled. A balding man in an expensive suit smirked openly. Bradley leaned closer, his voice carrying clearly. You know what the minimum balance requirement is for a standard account at this bank? $10,000. For preferred clients? $100,000. For private banking? $2 million. Each number was emphasized to underscore my perceived poverty. And you're in here, holding up the line, for $100. The line behind me had indeed grown. People checked watches and shifted impatiently. I don't see why this is taking so long, I said. Bradley's smile turned predatory. Well, this is a place of business, not charity. We don't usually serve. He paused for maximum effect, beggars. The word hung in the air like a slap. Several gasps punctuated the silence that followed. Even the most discreet eavesdroppers were now openly staring. I'm not a beggar, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm a customer. Are you, though? Let's check that account. Bradley turned to the computer, making a show of typing dramatically. Wilson. Mackenzie. Here we are. Checking account balance. $342.16. He announced the figure like an auctioneer revealing a disappointing opening bid. I felt dizzy with humiliation. Yes, my daily expenses account was modest, but my wealth wasn't defined by that particular balance. Well, technically, I suppose you are a customer, Bradley continued. In the same way someone who orders a glass of water is a restaurant patron. His colleagues had gathered now, uncomfortable smiles plastered on their faces. One woman looked genuinely embarrassed on my behalf. Is there a problem here? A tall man in an impeccable suit approached. From his demeanor and the immediate straightening of everyone's posture, I identified him as the bank manager. Bradley's smile widened. No problem, Mr. Harrington. Just helping my sister-in-law with a modest transaction. Mr. Harrington's eyes assessed me, taking in my casual clothes and obviously out-of-place presence. I see. Perhaps I can be of assistance. That's really not necessary, Bradley interjected. She's just making a small withdrawal. Very small. More knowing chuckles from the audience he'd cultivated. I'd had enough. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been judged by their appearance, every woman whose accomplishments had been diminished, every individual humiliated for their perceived economic status. Actually, I said, raising my voice slightly, I would appreciate speaking with the manager. Privately, please. Bradley rolled his eyes dramatically. Mr. Harrington is extremely busy with important clients. I'm sure we can handle your $100 without troubling him. It's no trouble, Mr. Harrington said smoothly, though his expression suggested otherwise. Bradley waved dismissively. She's just wasting everyone's time now. Let me finish this transaction so we can all get back to meaningful business. Mr. Harrington hesitated, clearly torn between professional courtesy and efficient use of his time. I looked him directly in the eye. 2 minutes of your time. Please. Something in my tone must have registered. He nodded curtly. Very well. This way, please. As I followed him toward a small office, Bradley called after us. Don't worry, we'll still have that $100 waiting when you're done. Might even throw in a lollipop like they do at the regular banks. More laughter. I kept walking, back straight, eyes forward. The real battle was just beginning. Mr. Harrington's office was small compared to the grand private banking suites visible through glass walls further inside the bank. He gestured to a chair across from his modest desk, his expression professional but impatient. How can I help you, Ms. Wilson? I understand you're here for a withdrawal. Yes, but not from the account my brother-in-law referenced. I reached into my bag and retrieved my phone. I'd like to access my private account. His expression didn't change. Clearly, he'd heard similar claims from those trying to appear more affluent than they were. Do you have your private banking credentials with you? I unlocked my phone, opened my banking app, and entered a sequence of passwords and authentication codes before passing it to him. I believe this should clarify things. Mr. Harrington glanced at the screen, his professional mask slipping for just a moment as his eyes widened. He quickly scrolled through the information, then looked up at me with completely transformed attention. Ms. Wilson, I apologize for the confusion. I wasn't aware we were serving you today. His tone had shifted from condescension to deference so quickly it was almost comical. That's entirely my fault, I said evenly. I should have made an appointment with my usual private banker, but I was in the neighborhood and thought a small withdrawal would be simple enough. Of course. He was already reaching for his phone. Let me call Mr. Atkinson immediately. He handles our most exclusive clients personally. That won't be necessary for a simple transaction, but I would appreciate some discretion. He nodded vigorously. Absolute discretion. However, for transactions of your magnitude, we do have special protocols. I suppressed a smile. I understand. Lead the way. As we exited his office, I could feel the weight of stares. Bradley was still at the teller station, watching with narrowed eyes as Mr. Harrington guided me not back to the regular line, but toward the private banking section behind the velvet rope. Mr. Harrington? Bradley called out, confusion evident in his voice. Is everything all right? Perfectly fine, Mr. Thompson, the manager replied without stopping. Just assisting Ms. Wilson with her banking needs. Bradley hurried to intercept us, his face a mixture of confusion and annoyance. I can handle my sister-in-law's transaction. There's no need to trouble yourself. Mr. Harrington didn't even slow down. Ms. Wilson requires our private banking services. Mr. Atkinson is being notified of her arrival. Private banking? Bradley repeated, laughing nervously. There must be some mistake. We continued past him toward a secluded area of the bank where the marble seemed shinier, the leather chairs deeper, and the conversations even more hushed. A security guard nodded respectfully and opened a glass door for us. Bradley followed, increasingly agitated. Mr. Harrington, this is ridiculous. I know my sister-in-law's financial situation intimately. She runs a failing software startup from a studio apartment. Neither of us acknowledged him as a distinguished older man approached, hand extended. Ms. Wilson, what an unexpected pleasure. I'm Thomas Atkinson, head of private client services. I don't believe we've had the honor of meeting in person before. I shook his hand. Most of my banking is handled electronically, Mr. Atkinson. Your team has been excellent. You know her. Bradley blurted, his composure cracking. Mr. Atkinson glanced at Bradley with the sort of dismissive look usually reserved for gum on one's shoe. Mr. Thompson, we're conducting private business here. Perhaps you should return to your station. But she's my sister-in-law, Bradley insisted, as if this relationship granted him special access. How fortunate for you, Mr. Atkinson replied coldly. Now, if you'll excuse us. Bradley stood frozen, watching as I was escorted to a luxurious private office with a view of the Manhattan skyline. Through the glass walls, I could see his expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the dawning horror of realization. Inside the office, Mr. Atkinson apologized profusely. Ms. Wilson, if Mr. Thompson behaved inappropriately, I assure you the bank will address the matter immediately. Let's focus on my transaction for now, I replied, settling into a buttery leather chair. I'd like to make a withdrawal today. Of course. Your usual banker, Miss Chen, is currently with another client, but I'd be happy to assist personally. What amount were you considering? I paused, considering. The $100 I'd originally come for seemed laughably small now. But something more substantial might make a point that neither Bradley nor this bank would soon forget. I'd like to withdraw $100 million, please. For investment purposes. If Mr. Atkinson was shocked by the amount, he hid it well. Certainly. That will require some additional paperwork and security arrangements. Would you prefer electronic transfer to your investment account, or are you establishing a new position? Let's prepare the paperwork for a cash withdrawal first. I can always decide on the final disposition afterward. His eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his professional veneer. A cash withdrawal of that size would be unusual. There are certain regulatory requirements and logistical considerations. I understand. Please begin the process anyway. He nodded and picked up his phone, speaking in hushed tones. Within minutes, the office began filling with bank executives, each introducing themselves with increasing levels of enthusiasm. I recognized some from the bank's annual reports and financial news. Through the glass, I could see Bradley standing near the entrance to the private banking section, his face ashen. A supervisor appeared to be speaking sternly to him. Several colleagues were watching the unfolding drama with undisguised interest. As paperwork materialized and was placed before me for signatures, Bradley finally gathered the courage to knock on the glass door. Mr. Atkinson looked to me questioningly. "It's fine," I said. "Let him in." Bradley entered like a man approaching the gallows, his earlier arrogance replaced by naked panic. "Mac, can we talk for a moment?" "Privately." "I'm in the middle of a transaction, Bradley. Was there something you needed?" "I don't understand what's happening," he said, voice low and urgent. "Is this some kind of joke?" Mr. Atkinson cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, Ms. Wilson is one of our most valued private clients. I suggest you address her with appropriate respect." Bradley's eyes darted between us, then to the paperwork on the desk, paperwork with more zeros than he'd likely ever seen on a single transaction. "There must be some mistake," he insisted, though his voice had lost its conviction. "Mac lives in a tiny apartment. She drives a Honda from 2008. Her business is just her and a few programmers working out of a converted warehouse. My lifestyle choices are just that, choices," I replied calmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a withdrawal to complete." But what about Sarah? Does she know about this?" "My financial situation is not something I discuss casually at family gatherings, especially when those gatherings have become opportunities for ridicule." His face flushed. "I never. You called me a beggar less than 20 minutes ago, Bradley. In front of your colleagues and customers." The executives in the room shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Atkinson's expression hardened further. "That was just a joke," Bradley stammered. "You know how I kid around." It didn't feel like a joke to me. I turned back to the paperwork, signing my name with deliberate strokes. It felt like years of condescension and judgment finally spoken aloud. "Mr. Thompson," Mr. Atkinson said firmly, "I believe you should step outside while we complete Ms. Wilson's transaction." Bradley ignored him, his desperation mounting. "Mac, please, let's talk about this. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. Really. We're family." "Family," I repeated softly. "Is that what we are?" Because it hasn't felt that way in a very long time. I signed the final form and handed it to Mr. Atkinson, who nodded solemnly. "Everything appears to be in order, Ms. Wilson. We'll begin processing immediately. Given the size of the withdrawal, we'll need to coordinate with several institutions. Would tomorrow morning be acceptable for completion?" "That would be fine." "Excellent. We'll arrange secure transport and necessary security measures." "Is there anything else we can assist with today?" I glanced at Bradley, who looked like he might be sick. "No, thank you. That will be all." As the executives filed out, leaving just the three of us, Bradley made one last desperate attempt. "Mac, my job is not my concern," I finished for him. "Just as my dignity wasn't yours earlier today." I stood to leave, nodding respectfully to Mr. Atkinson. "Thank you for your assistance. I'll return tomorrow as arranged." Bradley followed me out, past the velvet rope, through the main banking floor where curious eyes tracked our progress. The whispers had already started. The bank that had witnessed my humiliation was now witnessing Bradley's. Just before the main doors, I paused and turned to him. "Oh, and Bradley? I won't be needing that $100 after all." The following morning, I returned to Prestige National Bank dressed exactly as I had been the day before, worn jeans, comfortable sweater, scuffed boots. The only difference was that this time, I was expected. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. The security guard who had eyed me suspiciously now rushed to open the door. "Good morning, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Atkinson is waiting for you." Inside, the bank had an entirely different energy. Staff members smiled deferentially as I passed. Customers who had witnessed yesterday's scene whispered behind manicured hands. And there, standing near the teller stations with the rigid posture of someone facing a firing squad, was Bradley. He looked like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, cardinal sins in his meticulous presentation. When our eyes met, he attempted a smile that came across as more of a grimace. Mr. Atkinson approached, flanked by several executives. MS. Wilson, wonderful to see you again. Everything has been prepared according to your specifications. Would you care for coffee before we proceed? No, thank you. I'd prefer to complete the transaction without delay. Of course. Right this way. As we moved toward the private banking section, I noticed something unusual. The main banking floor was significantly more crowded than it should have been on a Friday morning. Staff members who had no obvious business on the floor were finding reasons to linger. Word had spread about yesterday's incident and the unprecedented withdrawal about to take place. The private banking suite had been transformed. Additional security personnel stood at discrete intervals. A team from what appeared to be an armored car service waited in an adjacent room. The paperwork I had signed yesterday was displayed on a polished conference table, along with additional documents requiring final authorization. As discussed, we've arranged for the withdrawal of $100 million, Mr. Atkinson explained. Given the magnitude, we've coordinated with the Federal Reserve and several partner institutions. The physical currency will be transported under armed guard to whatever secure location you designate. I nodded, taking the seat at the head of the table. Through the glass walls, I could see that Bradley had followed us as far as the private banking entrance, where he now stood watching, his expression a complex mixture of shock, fear, and dawning comprehension. Before we proceed, I said, I'd like to understand the authentication protocols for a transaction of this size. Mr. Atkinson launched into a detailed explanation of the multi-level verification process, retinal scans, digital signatures, and federal oversight required. As he spoke, more bank executives filtered into the room, introducing themselves with increasing deference. MS. Wilson, I'm Harold Prescott, Chairman of the Board. Judith Blackwell, Chief Financial Officer. A pleasure to meet you in person. Richard Montgomery, Head of Global Investments. We're honored to serve you today. The parade of high-level executives continued, each treating me with a reverence that would have been comical if it weren't so telling about the power of perceived wealth. These were people who wouldn't have glanced at me twice yesterday. Today, they hung on my every word. As the final authentication measures were completed, Mr. Atkinson asked, "And how would you like the denominations arranged, Ms. Wilson?" Before I could answer, a commotion erupted outside the glass doors. Bradley was arguing with the security guard, gesturing frantically toward me. After a moment, the guard approached Mr. Atkinson, whispered something, and received a reluctant nod. Bradley burst into the room, his composure completely abandoned. "Mac, please, we need to talk. This is insane." The executives stared in shocked silence at this breach of protocol. Mr. Atkinson's face hardened. "Mr. Thompson, this is completely inappropriate. Security will escort you out immediately." "Wait," I said, raising a hand. "Let him speak." Bradley approached the table, aware of the numerous eyes judging his every movement. "Mac, I don't understand what's happening. Yesterday you were, and now you're." He gestured helplessly at the surroundings. "How is this possible?" "I sold my company 2 months ago. Modest Merchant was acquired for $800 million. His jaw literally dropped. The little software thing he had mocked for years had made me wealthier than he could ever hope to be with his banking career. 800 million, he repeated, the words seemingly impossible to process. Yes. After taxes and ensuring my employees were taken care of, I cleared just over 500 million. Bradley collapsed into a chair, uninvited. "Why didn't you tell us? Why are you still living in that apartment? Driving that car?" "Because those things don't matter to me, Bradley." "They never did." I turned back to Mr. Atkinson. "I apologize for the interruption. Shall we continue?" Mr. Atkinson nodded, shooting Bradley a look of profound disapproval. "As I was saying, we can arrange the currency in whatever denominations you prefer. Standard mixed denominations will be fine." "Very good. And the security transport?" We've prepared several options for your consideration. As he outlined elaborate security measures involving armored vehicles and private security teams, Bradley sat in stunned silence, watching the process unfold. Occasionally, he would shake his head slightly, as if trying to reconcile the Mackenzie Wilson he thought he knew with the woman commanding this level of institutional respect. One of the executives leaned forward. "Ms. Wilson, forgive me for asking, but a cash withdrawal of this magnitude is unusual. Might I inquire about its purpose?" Before I could answer, Bradley interjected desperately, "She's not really taking the money. This is just some kind of lesson, right, Mac? To show me up after yesterday." All eyes turned to me. The room had gone completely silent. Even the security personnel were watching with undisguised interest. "The purpose," I said carefully, "is to remind certain individuals and institutions that appearances can be deceiving and that treating people with dignity should not be contingent on their perceived net worth." Mr. Atkinson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ms. Wilson, I want to assure you that Prestige National Bank values all its clients, regardless of their account balances." "Does it?" I asked mildly. "Because yesterday, I was humiliated on your main banking floor while attempting to withdraw $100. Not a single staff member intervened until I specifically requested to speak with management." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. The chairman, Mr. Prescott, leaned forward. "Ms. Wilson, if there was any mistreatment, I assure you we take such matters extremely seriously. Rest assured, appropriate action will be taken." All eyes briefly flicked to Bradley, whose career prospects were visibly dimming by the second. "I would hope so," I replied. "Now, about the transfer." "Mac," Bradley interrupted again, his voice breaking slightly. "Please. Think about Sarah. About family." "I have thought about family, Bradley, for years. While you were mocking my career, my car, my clothes, all choices I made consciously. By the way, I was building something meaningful. Something that helps thousands of small business owners like my parents." His face flushed with shame. For perhaps the first time since I'd known him, Bradley Thompson appeared genuinely speechless. I turned back to the assembled banking officials. "Gentlemen, ladies, I appreciate the arrangements you've made. However, I believe I've made my point. I won't be completing the cash withdrawal today." A collective sigh of relief swept the room. Moving $100 million in physical currency would have been a logistical nightmare, even with their elaborate preparations. Instead, I continued, "I'd like to transfer $50 million to establish a new foundation supporting small businesses affected by medical hardships, something my parents would have appreciated. The remaining $50 million can stay in my accounts here, provided certain changes are made to ensure all clients are treated with respect, regardless of their appearance or the size of their transaction." Mr. Prescott nodded eagerly. "We would be honored to partner with your foundation, Ms. Wilson. And I personally guarantee a full review of our client service protocols." As the executives rushed to accommodate my revised instructions, Bradley sat motionless, the full impact of his misjudgment settling over him like a shroud. His carefully constructed world of status and appearance had been shattered in less than 24 hours. I stood to leave, the necessary transfer instructions completed. "Mr. Atkinson, thank you for your assistance. I believe we're finished here." "Of course, Ms. Wilson. It's been our pleasure. Will you be requiring a car service?" I smiled. "No, thank you. My Honda is parked outside. It may not be impressive, but it's reliable and paid for values my parents taught me to appreciate." As I walked toward the exit, banking officials lined up to shake my hand and offer business cards. Bradley followed a few steps behind, a man watching his professional reputation disintegrate in real time. Outside, in the bright morning sunlight, he finally found his voice again. "What are you going to tell Sarah?" I paused beside my faithful old car. "I haven't decided yet, but I think it's time for some honest conversation in this family, don't you?" His shoulders slumped in defeat. She's going to kill me when she finds out how I treated you. That's between you and her. I unlocked my car door. I suggest you start practicing sincere apologies. You're going to need them, both at home and at work. As I drove away, I caught a last glimpse of Bradley in my rearview mirror, standing alone on the sidewalk outside the bank where, until yesterday, he had felt so powerful. The bank where everything had changed, not because I had finally become wealthy, but because I had finally stood up for myself. The drive to Sarah and Bradley's Westchester mansion took nearly an hour, giving me plenty of time to reflect. My Honda, maligned so often by Bradley, hummed steadily along the highway. I'd purchased it used after college and maintained it meticulously, another lesson from my father, who believed in caring for what you have rather than constantly chasing something newer and shinier. I hadn't planned to visit Sarah before the scheduled dinner party tomorrow, but after the bank incident, waiting seemed impossible. Our relationship needed addressing as urgently as Bradley's behavior had. The security guard at their gated community recognized my car and gave me a perfunctory wave. I'd visited often enough to be known, though never quite welcomed. The manicured lawns and imposing homes represented everything Sarah had aspired to since childhood. She'd achieved the lifestyle she wanted, but at what cost to her authentic self? Sarah's massive Tudor-style home appeared ahead, all stone facade and perfect landscaping. I parked in the circular driveway beside her Mercedes SUV, feeling the familiar sense of inadequacy their wealth usually triggered in me. Today, though, the feeling was tempered by a new perspective. My choices had been deliberate, hers had too. I rang the doorbell, hearing the melodious chime echo through their cavernous foyer. After a moment, Sarah answered, her expression shifting from surprise to immediate criticism. "Mac? What are you doing here? The dinner party isn't until tomorrow." Her eyes scanned my appearance with practiced disappointment. "And you're still wearing those awful jeans." I specifically said no denim. "Hello to you too, Sarah." I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." She sighed dramatically, closing the door behind me. "If this is about Bradley's text, I already told him I'd take you shopping before dinner. Though I don't see why you can't handle basic social attire at your age. Bradley texted you? Just something about making sure you felt welcome tomorrow. Honestly, he's being weird today. Called me 3 times from work, but never got to the point." She led me through their showroom of a house toward the kitchen. "Want coffee?" Greta just made a fresh pot before she left. Greta was their weekday housekeeper, another detail from their life that had always been subtly wielded to highlight the difference in our circumstances. Coffee would be great. The kitchen was a designer's dream, all marble and gleaming appliances that looked barely used. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, pouring coffee into delicate cups that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "So what's this about?" "I'm meeting the interior designer in an hour to discuss redoing the guest rooms." I took the offered cup. "It's about Bradley. Something happened at the bank today." Sarah's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "What, did he finally get that promotion?" "He's been insufferable about it for weeks." "No, not a promotion. Quite the opposite, actually." Her expression sharpened. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, the front door opened and closed with a heavy thud. Bradley's voice called out, strained and urgent, "Sarah, are you home?" Sarah frowned at her watch. "Why is he back so early?" Bradley appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his bank attire, but looking disheveled and frantic. He froze when he saw me. "You're here," he said flatly. "I am." Sarah looked between us, sensing the tension. "What is going on?" "Bradley, why aren't you at work?" He loosened his tie further, a gesture so uncharacteristic it made Sarah's eyes widen. "I took the rest of the day off. We need to talk." That's what Max said. "Will someone please tell me what's happening?" Bradley moved to the liquor cabinet, pouring himself a generous measure of scotch, despite it being barely noon. "You tell her," he said to me, downing half the glass in one swallow. I set my coffee cup down carefully. Sarah, there's something I haven't told you. About my company, Modest Merchant. Your little software thing? She echoed Bradley's dismissive phrasing perfectly, confirming they'd discussed me in exactly the terms I'd suspected. Yes, 2 months ago it was acquired by tech giant Industries for $800 million. Sarah's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. That's not funny, Mac. It's not a joke. I'm now worth over $500 million after taxes and employee compensation. Sarah stared at me, then at Bradley, who nodded grimly and finished his scotch. That's impossible, she stammered. You live in that tiny apartment. You wear the same clothes for years. Your car is ancient. By choice, I emphasized, not necessity. Sarah collapsed onto a kitchen stool, her perfectly manicured hand pressed against her throat. I don't understand. Your husband does, I said, glancing at Bradley. Would you like to explain what happened at the bank, or should I? Bradley poured another scotch, his hand visibly shaking. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Over the next 20 minutes, Bradley recounted the bank incident, each humiliating detail forcing its way through his obvious reluctance. Sarah's expression cycled through disbelief, horror, and finally, a cold anger I'd never seen directed at her husband before. You called my sister a beggar? Her voice was deadly quiet. In public? At your workplace? Bradley stared into his empty glass. I didn't know. That she was rich? Sarah cut in sharply. So, it would have been fine if she weren't? Is that what you're saying? His silence was answer enough. Sarah turned to me, her perfect composure cracking slightly. And you went back today to what? Destroy his career. I went back to make a point, I corrected. About dignity and respect. About judging people by appearances. By withdrawing $100 million in cash? That's insane, Mac. I didn't actually withdraw it, but the bank needed to believe I would. Bradley laughed humorlessly. Oh, they believed it. The chairman of the board personally apologized to her. The head of global investments offered to manage her portfolio for free. Meanwhile, I've been suspended pending an ethics review. Sarah's face paled. Suspended? Bradley, your bonus is the least of my concerns right now, he finished, pouring a third scotch. I'll be lucky if I'm not fired outright. The three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. The massive kitchen, with its status-signaling appliances and imported fixtures, suddenly seemed hollow and performative, much like the relationship we'd been maintaining for years. Why didn't you tell me? Sarah finally asked, her voice smaller than I'd heard it since we were children. About the money, about the company, any of it. I studied my sister's face, still beautiful, still familiar beneath the expensive highlights and cosmetic procedures. Would it have mattered? Would it have changed how you see me? Of course it would have, she exclaimed, then caught herself as she registered the implication of her words. Exactly, I said quietly. And that's the problem, isn't it? My worth to you, to both of you, has always been tied to external markers. What I earn, what I wear, where I live. That's not fair, Sarah protested, but her conviction was wavering. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my work without dismissing it as that little software thing? When was the last time you invited me somewhere without criticizing my appearance or suggesting I was somehow embarrassing you? Bradley refilled his glass silently, avoiding both our gazes. I didn't tell you about the acquisition because I wanted to see if anything would change between us naturally, I continued. If we could find our way back to being sisters without money as a factor. Sarah's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. We are sisters. Are we? Because most days, it feels like I'm just an obligation you tolerate, a reminder of a past you'd rather forget. The doorbell rang, interrupting our confrontation. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, visibly relieved at the distraction. That must be Vivian, the interior designer. She stood, smoothing her cashmere sweater. I should. Go ahead, I said. We can finish this later. As Sarah left to answer the door, Bradley looked at me directly for the first time since arriving home. What happens now? With the bank, with everything. That depends partly on you, I replied. On whether yesterday was an aberration or a true reflection of how you view people with less financial means than yourself. He had the decency to look ashamed. I've never spoken to anyone else that way. But you've thought it, I challenged. About waiters, cashiers, the gardeners who maintain your perfect lawn. His silence confirmed my suspicion. Sarah returned with a stylish woman carrying fabric swatches and design portfolios. She hesitated in the doorway, clearly sensing the tension. Vivian, I'm so sorry, but we're dealing with a family situation. Could we reschedule for Monday? The designer agreed readily, making a swift exit. As the front door closed, Sarah turned back to us, her social mask discarded. Your dinner party tomorrow, I said. Will you still have it with Bradley's situation at the bank? Sarah's eyes darted to her husband, then back to me. I don't know. The Prescotts will be there, and the Montgomerys. Harold Prescott? I asked. Richard Montgomery. Bradley groaned softly. The chairman and the head of investments. Both of whom now apparently worship the ground Mac walks on. Sarah's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. They're coming to my dinner party, and they now know that we've been treating you like a poor relation you tolerate out of obligation? I finished for her. Yes, I imagine that will make for some interesting dinner conversation. The house phone rang, adding to the chaotic atmosphere. Sarah answered it, her expression growing, increasingly distressed as she listened. That was Elaine Prescott, she said after hanging up. She's terribly sorry, but they won't be able to make it tomorrow. Something about an unexpected commitment with her dear friend Mackenzie Wilson that simply can't be rescheduled. I stifled a surprised laugh. I had no plans with Elaine Prescott, who until today had no idea I existed. The bank executives were clearly choosing sides, and not in Bradley's favor. I never asked them to cancel, I assured Sarah. It doesn't matter, she replied, sinking back onto a kitchen stool. The Montgomerys will call next, then the Sullivans. By evening, we'll be hosting a dinner party for exactly nobody. Bradley reached for the scotch bottle again, but Sarah intercepted his hand. I think you've had enough. We need to figure this out. For the first time since childhood, I saw my sister taking control rather than performing the role she thought others expected of her. It was a glimpse of the Sarah I remembered, practical, decisive, real. Figure what out? Bradley asked miserably. My career is over. Our social standing is ruined. All because I mocked the wrong person in the wrong place. No, Sarah corrected firmly. All because you were cruel to my sister. The consequences would be deserved whether she had money or not. Bradley and I both stared at her, equally surprised by this unexpected defense. Sarah turned to me, her expression softening. The dinner party is canceled. Instead, I think the three of us need to have a real conversation about family, about the past, and about where we go from here. As Bradley slumped further into his chair and Sarah began clearing away coffee cups with her own hands rather than waiting for the housekeeper, I realized that wealth hadn't changed my life nearly as much as the truth finally being exposed. For better or worse, nothing between us would ever be the same again. 3 months after the bank incident, I parked my new electric car, a concession to practicality rather than status, outside the rehabilitation center where Bradley had been staying. The modern facility, nestled in the Connecticut countryside, specialized in treating executives for burnout, depression, and substance abuse, all issues that had surfaced in Bradley after his suspension from the bank. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, nervously checking her makeup in the visor mirror. Do I look okay? I want him to see I'm doing well, but not like I'm trying too hard. You look fine, I assured her. And he'll be happy to see you regardless. Today marked Bradley's completion of the 90-day program, a condition the bank had set for possibly reinstating him, albeit in a significantly reduced role. The ethics investigation had concluded with a formal reprimand, mandatory sensitivity training, and a demotion from management to regular banking services. His salary had been cut by 40%. Sarah had surprised everyone, perhaps even herself, by supporting the bank's decision. He needs to understand that actions have consequences, she'd said firmly when Bradley initially resisted the program. This isn't just about your career. It's about who you're becoming as a person. We entered the facility together, signing in at the reception desk where the staff greeted Sarah by name. She'd visited 3 times a week without fail, while I had come for the required family therapy sessions twice monthly. Bradley met us in the garden courtyard, looking healthier than he had in years. The perpetual tension in his shoulders had eased, and though his designer clothes had been replaced by simple khakis and a button-down shirt, he carried himself with a different kind of confidence. "You came," he said, embracing Sarah first, then extending a hand to me. We'd made progress, but weren't quite at hugging level yet. "Of course we came," Sarah replied. "It's a big day." We settled at a wrought iron table beneath a flowering dogwood tree. Bradley looked at me directly, something he'd struggled with during our initial family therapy sessions. "I want to thank you, Mac." "For what?" "For not pressing charges against the bank. For giving me a chance to keep my job, even at a lower level. For coming to the therapy sessions." He paused. "For forgiving me when I didn't deserve it." I nodded, acknowledging his gratitude without diminishing the seriousness of what had happened. "Your recovery has to be for you, Bradley. Not for your job or your social standing. I know that now." He gestured around the peaceful grounds. 90 days gives you a lot of time to think about what actually matters." Sarah reached across the table to take his hand. They'd been working on their marriage alongside Bradley's personal issues. The journey hadn't been smooth. Sarah had moved into the guest house for a month when Bradley initially blamed her for encouraging his materialism, but they'd emerged stronger for confronting their shared values honestly. "So what happens now?" I asked. Bradley straightened in his chair. "I start back at the bank next Monday. Regular hours, regular customers. No management responsibilities." "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, relieved." He smiled wryly. "Turns out managing people isn't my strength. I'm looking forward to just doing the work without the politics." Sarah squeezed his hand. "And we've downsized. The house is on the market." This was news to me. "You're selling the Westchester mansion?" She nodded. "We're moving to a townhouse in the city. Smaller, but more practical with Bradley working downtown. And we don't need 6 bedrooms and a home theater for just the 2 of us." The shift in their priorities seemed genuine rather than forced. Over these months, I'd watched my sister rediscover parts of herself that had been buried beneath her pursuit of status. She'd even started volunteering at a community center teaching financial literacy, using skills from her business degree in a way that actually helped people. "I have news too," I said. "The foundation is officially launching next week. We've already approved grants for 50 small businesses affected by medical hardships. I'd named it the Wilson Family Foundation in honor of our parents. The mission was supporting entrepreneurs who were caring for ill family members while trying to keep their businesses afloat, exactly the situation our parents had faced, and that I'd faced after them." "That's wonderful, Mac," Sarah said, her enthusiasm genuine. "Mom and Dad would be so proud." "I hope so." I hesitated before continuing. "Actually, that's partly why I wanted to meet today, beyond celebrating Bradley's completion. I'd like you both to consider being involved with the foundation." They exchanged surprised glances. "In what capacity?" Bradley asked cautiously. "Sarah, with your business degree and event planning experience, you'd be perfect for coordinating our fundraising galas and community outreach. And Bradley, your banking background, especially now that you're working with regular customers rather than just the wealthy ones, gives you insight into the financial challenges small businesses face. You'd trust us with this?" Sarah asked quietly. "After everything?" "I'm not saying it would be immediate. You could start as volunteers, see if it's something you connect with. But yes, I would trust you. The people you're becoming, not the people you were." Bradley looked down at his hands. "I don't deserve a second chance." None of us deserve second chances, I replied. That's what makes them valuable. They're gifts, not entitlements. The conversation shifted to practical matters. When they would move, how Bradley's first week back might go, the details of the foundation launch. As we talked, I noticed a new equality in our dynamic. My financial status hadn't created a reverse imbalance where I now held power over them. Instead, our shared vulnerability had leveled the playing field in a way money never could. After lunch, we walked the grounds together before saying our goodbyes. Bradley would return home tomorrow after a final meeting with his therapist. As we reached my car, Sarah hung back slightly. Can I ask you something, Mac? Of course. Are you happy? With all the money, the foundation, everything that's happened. I considered the question carefully. I'm purposeful. The money itself doesn't make me happy or unhappy, it's just a tool. But using it to honor Mom and Dad's memory, to help people in situations like ours, that brings meaning. She nodded thoughtfully. I've been chasing the wrong things for so long. Status, appearances, other people's approval. We all do sometimes. Not you, she said with unexpected admiration. You always knew who you were. I laughed softly. I definitely didn't. I just knew who I didn't want to become. Bradley approached, having given us a moment of sister time. The car service is here for me. Last night in rehab. Sarah hugged him, whispering something in his ear that made him stand straighter, more resolved. When they separated, he turned to me. I owe you an apology that I can never fully express. Not just for the bank, but for years of judgment and condescension. He extended his hand again. I hope someday to be worthy of calling you family. I took his hand, then surprised both of us by pulling him into a brief hug. Family isn't about worthiness, Bradley. It's about growth and forgiveness. Both directions. As they walked toward his waiting car, I found myself thinking about our parents. How they'd valued honesty and hard work above status, how they'd taught us that character outweighs appearance every time. Sarah had temporarily lost sight of those lessons in her pursuit of what she thought was success. I had sometimes clung to them too rigidly, using my principled modesty as a shield against intimacy and vulnerability. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in the middle, in the balance between remembering your roots and embracing growth, between maintaining values and allowing change. 2 weeks later, I stood at my parents' graves, fresh flowers in hand. Sarah stood beside me, her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater not unlike what I typically wore. We hadn't coordinated outfits. She'd simply rediscovered her own comfortable style rather than what she thought was expected of her. Do you think they can see us? She asked softly as we placed the flowers. Do you think they know about everything that's happened? I like to think they do, I replied. Not the money part, that wouldn't matter to them. But the foundation, the people we're helping, the way we found our way back to being sisters, that would matter. Sarah linked her arm through mine, a gesture from our childhood that felt both foreign and familiar. I'm sorry it took a bank meltdown and Bradley's public humiliation for me to remember who I really am. Sometimes we need dramatic wake-up calls. I smiled at her. Though maybe next time, we can skip the $100 million withdrawal threat. She laughed, the sound echoing across the peaceful cemetery. Deal. As we walked back to our cars, her new modest sedan parked beside my electric vehicle, I realized that wealth had changed me after all, just not in the ways people might expect. It hadn't altered my values or lifestyle significantly, but it had given me the confidence to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and ultimately, to offer forgiveness from a place of strength rather than obligation. Money, I'd learned, didn't determine character, it simply revealed it. In Bradley's case, wealth and status had exposed his insecurities and prejudices. In Sarah's case, the pursuit of wealth had temporarily buried her authentic self. And in my case, having wealth while choosing simplicity had finally allowed me to stop proving myself and start living authentically. The greatest inheritance from our parents wasn't financial, It was the understanding that dignity isn't determined by dollars, that respect should never be contingent on net worth, and that family, when it works as it should, is about acceptance rather than achievement. I've often wondered what would have happened if I'd revealed my wealth from the beginning. Would Bradley have treated me differently? Would Sarah and I have maintained a closer relationship? Perhaps. But then I would never have known who they or I truly were beneath the surface of status and appearance. So, what about you? Have you ever been judged by your appearance or financial status? Or found yourself judging others based on these superficial factors? What would you do if you suddenly came into wealth? Would you change your lifestyle completely or stay true to who you've always been? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Remember, true wealth isn't measured by your bank account, but by how you treat others, especially when no one's watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.